The worst fire season on record is raging across Oregon, California, and other western states. 6 of the largest fires in California history occurred this summer, and one of them, the 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗂𝗁𝗂 fire, is the largest ever at a stunning 750,000 acres.
The largest fire in state history is now burning in the Mendocino.
More than 6.7 million acres total have burned. Smoke has hit historic levels all across Oregon. At least 30 people have died, and thousands of homes have been destroyed.
Your kids' baby pictures, and it's all gone. There's no getting them back.
Fire has always been a natural part of the western landscape, but the legacy of 20th century forest management and fire suppression have changed our forests. Places which once burnt with low severity now burn catastrophically in firestorms beyond control. Our changing climate is extending the fire season, drying out fuels and creating high wind conditions which worsen fire behavior.
4th and 5th of town have been evacuated. Okay. First time in '99, the brush.
Climate and wildfire predictions suggest that the acres burned since 2000 will double or even triple in the next 30 years.
We have to change our approach in dealing with wildfire and how we manage our forests.
More and more homes are at risk as our communities expand into these vulnerable forests. As the costs of wildfire spiral out of control, environmental groups, the logging industry, and the federal government have reached a consensus that selective thinning and prescribed fire are vital tools to begin restoring western forests. This last September, 10% of Oregon's population was under evacuation orders, and dozens of people are missing from the towns of Talent and Phoenix. The town of Santa Rosa, which was devastated in 2017, was the first to bring national attention as these wildfires turn into urban catastrophes.
There was smoke and fire everywhere. All I could do was look and say to Mike Thompson, our congressman who had been in Vietnam, it looks like a war went on down there. It looks like a bomb. And he kept turning to me and saying, yeah, that's what it looks like, but it's actually worse.
There are close to about 20 fires that are scorching hundreds of thousands.
Thousands of firefighters have been unable to
across 8 counties, and hundreds more people are missing.
It traveled 16 miles in an instant, it seemed like. It just came roaring over the hills.
I've seen a lot of forest fires, but I had never seen anything like this before. It was otherworldly. To me, you couldn't illustrate it more than this. We're not up in the hills, we're in downtown Santa Rosa. The fire blew into Santa Rosa in the early morning hours. I think it was about 4 in the morning. I know people in this neighborhood who got the warning, looked out, saw a wall of flame, got in their car, escaped, and 4 minutes later their house was on fire. So that's how rapidly the fire moved through here. We've increasingly encroached our communities into these landscapes where we have removed fire and grazing from a lot of the landscape. And so the shrub layer has built up, the grasses have built up, and now when fire does come, it's a conflagration.
By the time I was 8 years old, I'd discovered that in fact there was a profession called forestry, and they paid people to actually go out and spend time in the woods. And I decided right then that's what I wanted to do. and that I wanted to work for the Forest Service. The mindset of the forester in mid-20th century was very much that forests were a collection of trees that you managed to produce wood. The agency sort of went over to the dark side, and through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, the timber harvest just continued to go up. So all of the pre-World War II period was devoted very much to creating an organization that could detect and suppress fire. The real mistake was made, which was to assume all fire was bad and all fire should be put out. Fire needed to be allowed to continue, and we didn't allow that. The fuels began to accumulate. The structure of the forest changed. Fuel-filled forests would now be consumed by the fire.
There was an erosion of trust in the agency's commitment to non-timber resources. Policies of the federal government rewarded timber management above all other resources on the national forest, and through the 60s and 70s was leading to the intentional elimination of old growth, which was considered to be slow growing and not an ideal resource for forestry. And foresters had been so successful at that there was very little old growth left.
Particularly here in the Northwest, there's a lot of old growth logging. Depending on who you talk to, between 2 and 5% of those native forests are still left. They need all the help that we can give them. I felt that that was really my calling. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to protect those places. Certainly legal work is really challenging because at the end of the day, somebody wins and somebody loses. And if you don't win, you know, the implication is that a special place is lost. Back in the 70s and 80s, we were harvesting billions of board feet every year off of the forests in Oregon and Washington alone. You can only do that for so long before the ecosystem starts to give out, and that's exactly what started to happen. It wasn't sustainable.
Once the scientists started detecting changes in wildlife populations, including the spotted owl, people kind of put 2 and 2 together and realized that the disappearance of old-growth forests was leading to the potential extinction of species, and that drove environmentalists to act.
I spent 18 years in the sawmill business, and they're toying with my life.
The tide turned. Too much was being lost in this very aggressive pursuit of converting the national forest to timber farms.
And that became the Northwest Forest Plan, which designated a series of large, protected, mostly old-growth areas across the Cascade Mountain Range and west in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And that sort of set off dominoes across the national forest system. Harvest on the national forests fell by an order of magnitude in just a few years.
We had anywhere from 2 to 3 hired help that was on the floor with us at most times, and we run from about 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. When the sawmills quit out and the logging quit, then I couldn't make enough money to pay hired help. So that lost a lot of population. Then they shut the Forest Service down. That lost some more population. And so we're down to probably, I don't know, 60, 80 people. I don't know what the logic is, but basically it's government logic.
Hi, Brenda. Hi, Greg. How's Clarking going? As long as I could remember, there had been at least 3 mills going here, Prairie Wood Products, Grant Western, and Mount Here Lumber. Both Grant Western and Mount Here Lumber were big log mills, so they took old-growth. When you shut down an industry, and it's about the only industry that provides a livelihood here, you're pretty upset, and it's hard to talk.
Well, I was skeptical that there was compromise possible. I started doing East Side timber sale work when I was still in law school. They'd done a bunch of litigation. We'd shut down the Malheurs timber program, so there really just wasn't anything happening. And that worked fine for me. I met Mark Webb for the first time in 2004, maybe. You know, Mark's a pretty cerebral guy. He's really smart. He's very articulate. You know, the impetus for being out there was a bad fire season in 2002. We had a lot of big fires in Oregon. Those sorts of occurrences were becoming more and more common. Whereas every, decade or so, you'd have a bad fire year. It was now every 4 or 5 years, and then it was every 2 or 3 years. And now it's pretty much every year.
That the only reason industry and the environmental community came together at all is because neither had an option anymore. SJ and others had essentially shut down the logging industry, and they were desperate for wood, and they were willing to take anything they could get as long as they got some more wood. Fortunately for us, the environmental community was also coming to appreciate that while they might have saved the old-growth trees from the timber industry, they were beginning to lose them increasingly to catastrophic wildfires, fires that would have been unnatural in the landscape in the past. And so they were confronted with the challenge of having to address that through active management, which they've been spending a lot of time shutting down.
This problem is not abstract. There are a few places where people have taken aggressive action to reduce the fuels around their homes and around communities, and in those places are definitely much better off. But at the larger scale, the fuel buildup continues, the climate continues to worsen, making it warmer, lowering relative humidities, perhaps even causing changes in wind patterns and precipitation. And now we have more extreme fire weather when we get it. The problem that we have in the US right now is that we put out every fire that we can, so we only get fire behavior associated with fires we can't put out. That means that the majority of the fire that we get is high severity fire that burns in a way that we don't want. And then more and more people are living in the wildland-urban interface, the place where wildland fuels come in contact with homes. And so there are more people in harm's way, and the harm is getting worse.
I just sort of back up to, this is a generational problem, right? We created it over generations, and so it's gonna take generations to fix it. My job in my lifetime is to make an increment of progress towards something better. The Watershed Center, is an organization like many other community-based organizations that were born out of the timber wars. We came into our work with an idea that we could find this elegant solution that linked economic development with land stewardship. So we were raising money to run crews that are doing, thinning all around the county in partnership with the Forest Service and private landowners. We were getting cooperative agreements to do prescribed fire work in and around our communities. This one here is a perfect example. This is a trailer blowout as well. And so here you go, it starts racing on a west wind, right? Communities here, as a high school, we're like here. But this isn't just a fuel treatment save the day.
Yeah.
You know, fire suppression still matters, preparedness, all those things, right? But this fire blows out, runs across town, looks like it's gonna be this conflagration, runs head on into this prescribed fire treatment, less than a year old, and just lays down. It literally cannot burn through that. And so it flanks, it lays down, they pick it up. Look, prescribed fire in this place makes the difference.
That's a great
and
story.
if we can start reinforcing that with these overlapping and, you know, staggered polygons of fire, you know, that actually...
You got to come tell that story in Sonoma County.
Happily.
So there are a lot of factors that have all kind of come together at the same time. Historical logging, grazing, and fire suppression allowed all these seedlings that had gotten established to grow up into the forest that has now gotten much more complex. It has big trees and small trees and live and dead fuels that can carry a surface fire from the ground all the way up into the canopy. But it's important to understand that there is a solution if we can just marshal the resources to get the work done. This is not an intractable problem.
So what we need to do in many of these environments is in fact go in and begin by mechanically reducing those fuels by saw and the axe and removing that material where we can in order to help pay for the treatment that we're doing.
Restoration projects leave behind the largest and most fire-adapted trees, while removing the many tiny trees that are clogging the forest. These small diameter trees have put more than 80 million acres at risk of catastrophic wildfire.
And there are a lot of those kinds of trees out on the landscape that need to go, and encourage the next generation of old growth trees to grow up as a result of sort of that succession process.
Many of the groups understand very clearly that, in fact, we need to be engaged with these forests. We need to be helping these forests.
So there's plenty of volume to be taken off. It's just not what historically we would have focused on.
Correct.
And it might require some market development and infrastructure.
Right. With this shared understanding, the work they do will restore the forest and the economic vitality of the resource-based communities they live in.
There are a lot of barriers. The first is funding and staffing for the Forest Service. Forest Service is the biggest landowner, public landowner on the east side. They are not funded by Congress, and they are not staffed appropriately to put these kinds of projects together. They simply just don't have the money, and they don't have the people to do it.
The small diameter trees have very little economic value and will be expensive to remove. This reality underscores the need to develop new high-tech products and markets that find enough value in the material removed to pay for the cost of the work. Fortunately, there is a growing demand for the next generation of sustainable housing and wooden high-rise buildings. These innovative structures are built in new ways that are only possible by gluing small diameter wood into composite materials. This approach is paving the way for a market large enough to handle the great volume of wood removed.
We're going to have prescribed fire here at Sonoma County Regional Parks right here in Sonoma Valley. Pretty excited about that. This is for you. Nice.
I hope I'm not ruining this.
Thank
It'll
God.
really feel sweet by 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay, so if it does get across that road down there, we'll have to pick that up just so we don't impact the power poles.
Yeah, hey, Cal Fire, you guys can integrate, with the local government here. You guys don't have to hang out like separate pockets.
You just get into this like nonverbal communication and you're like in the flow, and it's an awesome feeling. You just know that person needs water or that person needs you to scrape, and you're not even talking. We kind of had amnesia here in Sonoma County until the fires of October 2017, and now we've woken up and we know that we have to have a little bit of smoke and controlled fire before we get a mega fire coming through here. So it's really exciting to me.
Prescribed burning and mechanical removal reduce fuels and dovetail with long-term efforts to curb climate change. However, experts also agree that the challenge ahead is immense. Just this September, Melanie Small prescribed burn found itself directly in the path of the massive glass fire as her family and neighbors prepared to evacuate.
So the story's not over here in Santa Rosa.
Vehicles burned 4 miles in 6 hours over the morning hours.
I think people here are very fatigued. We got evacuation warning earlier this morning, and you can see the fire.
This is from my neighborhood.
Mom came at midnight last night. She was under evacuation order. And if anything goes wrong, you go to Zach's, or you get the pets and you go to the Slater field, basically. Okay. Does that make sense? And you've got your phone charged? Shoes too?
Oh, oops.
And basically just starting to get ready. Things ready. I've got the important papers. I've got my firefighting stuff. We had a ranger go down partway, but he couldn't go far enough south to get all the way to where our prescribed fire was. But I'm guessing it made a difference. I'm hoping it made a difference. With each repeated event, people are going, oh, this is not a one-off. This is not an accident. This is a pattern, and we need to prepare for it.